Now, most people flush away the single best clue to their health, their poop. So today I want to talk about how the size, shape, and even color of your poop can reveal what's happening inside your gut and what you can do about it. Now, just a quick reminder, if you find this kind of information helpful, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps more people discover this podcast. All right, number one, why poop matters. Now, most people think poop is just undigested food. In fact, that's what I was taught in medical school, that magically we swallow food and magic happens in our intestines and we absorb what we need in terms of proteins and fats and sugars and some vitamins and minerals. And whatever we don't digest comes out the rear end. But actually, the majority of our poop is actually living and dead gut bacteria, your gut buddies. So a healthy, well-fed microbiome equals a healthy poop. And if your poop looks off, it's a sign those gut buddies aren't happy, or there's some bad actors that have snuck into the scene. Now, number two, let's talk about shapes and what they mean and what to do about it. If you've got marbles as your poop, constipation, these tiny hard pellets usually mean either dehydration or, more importantly, not enough soluble fiber. Many people during the Atkins craze, the high protein craze, and now the carnivore craze, which are all the same thing, noticed that their poops suddenly became much less frequent, and that frequently, basically always coming out, were pebbles. And we were assured that that's a good thing because you're no longer eating these evil carbohydrates that you're pooping out. Again, nothing could be more wrong about that. Since most of your poop are living and dead bacteria, the fact that all of a sudden there's not much coming out except little hard balls means that you do not have a good growth of bacteria. Bacteria love soluble fiber. That's what they eat. And when they eat it, they divide and make lots of other little baby bacteria, if you will. So when you're pooping marbles, that's a sign that you actually need far more fiber in your diet. Now, it could be dehydration. Remember that the colon's job, your large intestine, it is to absorb nutrients, but more importantly, it's designed to absorb water from the stool back into you. So if it's absorbing a lot of water, that usually means you need to drink more water. And the good news is tea and coffee count. Neither of these dehydrate you. So however you get your liquids, get more liquids. Number two, feed your gut buddies with what they want to eat to make more gut buddies. Leafy greens, artichokes, radicchio, psyllium husk, psyllium powder, inulin powder, and ground flax seeds are all great ways to increase prebiotic fiber. Also remember that you need to avoid antibiotic-fed meats and artificial sweeteners like sucralose, which will kill off your microbiome. And quite frankly, if you're busy killing off your microbiome by having a sucralose-sweetened candy bar or protein bar or drink, you can take all the fiber in the world, but if there's no one there to eat it, you won't have a chance of having a normal-looking stool. Now, in some people, when constipation is chronic, magnesium in their various forms, around 300 to 600 milligrams a night, can often work wonders. And I've already done a full talk about the various forms of magnesium, why most of my patients are magnesium deficient, because our soil is now almost completely devoid of magnesium. And so think about adding magnesium, particularly if you've done all the other tricks I just mentioned and you're still having pebbles for poop. All right, what about lumpy or caterpillar-like poop? Now, sometimes this is also problems with constipation, and it's often from not enough fiber, but more often it's also that different bacteria need different foods to eat. And we often see people make the mistake that, well, I'll use an example, if inulin, which is present in the chicory family of vegetables and artichoke hearts and asparagus, and it's also available as a powder or capsules. If some inulin is good, then more inulin must be better. That's not necessarily the case. We're now learning, thanks to advanced stool testing, looking at who's in our microbiome, that different bacteria need different prebiotics to eat, that different bacteria need different polyphenols to eat. So what we've learned from hunter-gatherers is that hunter-gatherers may be eating 100 to 150 grams of prebiotic fiber a day, whereas the average American eats 5 grams if we're lucky. They're not eating 150 grams of inulin per day. They're eating 150 grams of fiber in various plants that they collect during the day. Different plants, whatever is available that day or that season. So they're constantly giving a new mix, a smorgasbord of prebiotic foods to their gut buddies. And I think that's one of the key missing points of the prebiotic fiber craze that we're hearing about. So just because you're picking up a soda that has a little bit of prebiotic fiber with lots of sugar in it, that's not what you're looking for. And in fact, it's not going to change a thing. And finally, you do need to continue to think about hydration if that's a problem with your stool. On the other hand, if you've had normal bowel movements and all of a sudden you notice that your bowel movements are becoming more slender or almost look like they're extruded through a narrow orifice, almost like Spritz cookies, then that's a sign that there may be a constrictive lesion in your colon, like colon cancer. You may not notice blood, you may not have pain, but if your stool starts to look narrow, or if you notice that it is more difficult to have an elimination, then that should prompt you and your doctor for looking for a more serious reason. Incidentally, there are blood tests that are fairly accurate for looking at signs of colon cancer, and there's certainly stool tests now that are fairly accurate for looking for colon cancer. So you don't necessarily immediately need to run out and schedule colonoscopy, but it should be a warning sign. All right, now what about stools that float? They literally come to the surface. Now, a floating stool usually means that the fat that you're eating isn't being digested properly. Now, occasionally, we do see people who go on an ultra-high fat diet, like a ketogenic diet, and they do notice that their stool is floating. And that's because you've eaten so much fat that your normal digestive enzymes can't keep up with the fat you're eating. You may remember a few years ago when a popular dietary fix, which was a fat that couldn't be absorbed, was added to consumer products in the mistaken attempt to help you lose weight. And lots of people noticed that their stools floated when they were using these snack products. Luckily, that phase died off fairly quickly for obvious reasons. But the point is, you can overcome your normal digestive enzymes by eating very heavily fat-based meals. On the other hand, if you're not eating heavily fat-based meals and you do notice floating stools, that usually means that you're not making enough digestive enzymes, whether they're bile salts and bile from the liver or pancreatic enzymes. We can also measure the ability of these or the amount of these digestive enzymes in certain stool tests, but a lot of times pancreatic enzymes or digestive enzymes added to a meal, if that solves the problem, then that's what's going on. If your poop is pale or clay colored, it might indicate a real problem that a bile duct is obstructed, and it's time to talk to your doctor. This is a really ominous sign. All right, so what about soft serve poop? Mushy. A lot of times, in my experience, this is caused by irritation of the gut wall, usually from lectins like gluten or from other lectin-rich foods like beans or like the nightshade families. There's some work that came out of my alma mater, the Medical College of Georgia, that the reason these foods promote a bowel movement is that they actually irritate the lining of your colon, like literally swallowing razor blades. And the reason you have a bowel movement is you're trying to get rid of this irritant. Makes sense, doesn't it? So this is actually usually an easy fix. First of all, pull back or eliminate lectin-rich foods like grains, beans, and nightshades. That's number one. If you must have these, make sure you're using a pressure cooker. But warning, you cannot pressure cook gluten. It will not break down. Recently, there was a new paper looking at whether sourdough bread, sourdough baking, eliminates gluten in the bread. And this was actually a European study. And sadly, even with fermented sourdough bread, gluten and its components were not broken down and was still able to cause irritation to the gut. Now, secondly, I've seen through the years, and proved it in myself as well with my patients, that many times raw vegetables, particularly raw cruciferous vegetables, or even something simple like raw leafy greens, have enough plant defense compounds in them to irritate your colon. And if that's the case, the easy fix is to really cook your cruciferous vegetables, even pressure cook them if you need to, and basically make a mush. So mushy that you can turn them into a fantastic soup. And so a lot of my patients with this kind of chronic, irritated, soft serve bowel movement, this is the first step. First of all, we eliminate the troublemakers, and then we really nuke the cruciferous vegetables and leafy greens into basically soup. And that's usually the way around it. All right, what about watery diarrhea? Well, there are a number of reasons for watery diarrhea. The number one is you've usually acquired a parasite or a bad bacteria from travel or from poorly sanitized hand washing in the restaurant you went to. And it can even be from how the food is picked and who was picking it in the field. Now, sometimes these are called Montezuma's revenge. These pop up all the time. The good news is that most of these traveler diarrhea are short-lived, and they usually last from 3 days to a maximum of 2 weeks. A lot of these can be a bacterial problem, like, give you an example, Shigella, that you really should not treat with these anti-diarrheals that you can get over the counter, like Imodium or Lomodal, which is a prescription, it actually worsens it. Now, most of the time, you do not have to use an antibiotic. There are numerous natural products that I use to treat these disorders. Now, among them are berberine, oil of oregano, garlic, L-glutamine, and that's just to name a few. These things work and work really quite well. And we can see on progressive stool tests that if you've got a parasite like Giardia, that most of the time, this traditional functional way of treating these disorders works. Occasionally, if it gets past a couple of weeks, then, and these first treatments don't work, it's time to look deeper. And every now and then, I have to use a very specific antibiotic that's targeted at the bug that's troubling that person to use it. So what do you do? Well, first of all, cut out lectins first. Now, if you're traveling, I always carry short-term Pepto-Bismol tablets or bismuth subsalicylate. I usually recommend using 8 tablets a day for up to 7 days. Now, it's been a pretty good trick, and it can often reset your gut. Another trick that I was actually part of developing, but I have no relationship, is an interesting product called Dia Rescue. And it's available on Amazon. It's in a lot of drugstores. And I actually travel with it when I'm doing medical missionary work, particularly in Africa or in India. And it's really useful to stop up diarrhea. So look for Dia Rescue wherever you find these products. If not, it's on Amazon. If this is going on for a long time, like I mentioned, make sure to try to avoid Imodium if this is going on a long time, and just let it run its course. Now, what about black, maroon, or bloody stools? First of all, if you see bright red blood when you wipe, or even dripping into the toilet after a bowel movement, it's often, almost always from hemorrhoids. Now, that in itself isn't an emergency call to alarm. However, if it's maroon or dark, or your stools are tarry, this is almost certainly to be internal bleeding, and you need to make an appointment to see your doctor. Dark stools possible if you're taking a lot of Pepto-Bismol. Yes, absolutely. So if you're taking Pepto-Bismol and your stools turn dark, no, you're not bleeding internally. Okay? Finally, what about the color of your poop? Now, in general, brown is the normal color of poop. That means it's healthy. And the brown actually is coming from the bilirubin that's in bile. Now, I've done this. I've had some of my patients do this. If your stool is turning more and more green, you're usually eating a lot of chlorella, a lot of spirulina, or a lot of dark leafy greens. In fact, years ago, I was experimenting with some recommendations that you should keep taking chlorella and spirulina until you see your stool turn green, and then you know you've reached where you should be. I can assure you that's a lot of chlorella and spirulina, and I don't do that practice anymore. On the other hand, dark leafy greens, unless you're eating them raw, you really won't see that real green color. Now, if it's yellow, it often means things are actually moving through too quickly, and you haven't had enough time to make things more brown. What if it's orange? Believe it or not, you are what you eat. And one of the great ways to turn your stool orange is to eat a lot of carrots or drink a lot of carrot juice. And by the way, your skin will turn orange as well. Like I mentioned before, if it's clay colored or even white, this is a serious issue, and it usually signals a liver or bile duct blockage. And this is something you got to be on the phone to your healthcare provider right away. So what should a healthy poop look like? Well, a healthy poop should look like a big coiled log. Not too hard, not too soft. And what if you're wiping and wiping? That's a sign your gut buddies need help. Amazingly enough, when your microbiome is thriving, you barely need toilet paper, just like every other animal on the planet. And to this day, I still delight when one of my newer patients comes to me and says, "You're not going to believe this. I don't need toilet paper anymore, just like you said." I said, "Yeah, it's really amazing, isn't it?" So this is a way to be looking for whether you got the right guys and feeding them the right way. What are the tips for a perfect poop? First of all, feed your gut buddies what they want. They love chicory. They love radicchio. They love Jerusalem artichokes. They love psyllium, ground flax, modified citrus pectin, apple pectin. Number 2, you've got to avoid irritants like grains like wheat, bran, barley, rye. Avoid artificial sweeteners and lectin-heavy foods. Use fermented foods almost daily. Now, people hear fermented foods, they think sauerkraut or kimchi, and that's great. But also remember that vinegar is a fermented food. Coffee, tea is a fermented food. Extra dark chocolate is a fermented food. And yogurts, particularly goat or sheep or coconut yogurt or kefirs and low sugar kombuchas are all fermented foods. We know it takes 2 to make your gut buddies happy. They gotta have prebiotic fiber, but they've gotta have fermented food postbiotics to activate that process. Stay hydrated and take magnesium at night if needed. And by the way, magnesium's a great sleep aid, and it's a great way to prevent cramps at night. Finally, for some people, you've really got to cook your cruciferous vegetables a lot to reduce their plant defense compounds. So your poop is your gut's daily report card. If something looks off, marbles, floaters, or soft serve, it's your body's way of asking for better care. Take care of your gut buddies, and you'll have that healthy coiled snake smiling back at you from the toilet. And think of the money you're going to save on toilet paper.